I'd like to call this meeting of the Joint Architectural Review Board and the City Planning Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Harvey.
Here.
Carroll. Welsh.
Here.
Brillianthan.
Here.
Gunyon.
Here.
Taylor.
Here.
Watke.
Here.
Hunter.
Here.
Stocko.
Here.
Geeslin.
Here.
Minell.
Here.
Schroeder.
Here. Just to get this going, I think there's been some confusion. There's probably been some differences of opinion in regard to the role of the Historic Preservation Committee and the Planning Commission and the city as a whole. And we'd like to just have we've got a presentation, we'd like a discussion, we'd like to figure out who's responsible for what and how we're gonna move forward with that. And I think ultimately the Planning Commission will have to decide that, but we'd like a lot of input from people in this room. And we're not gonna make a decision tonight of any sort, but I think we can get a lot of information on the table, and I think it'll be really helpful for all of us. I guess starting out, Pat, would you like to start with your presentation, just to get us going?
Do you want to? Sure. Go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Pat Blackmer, and I happen to be the chairman of the Landmarks Commission in the city of Whitewater. And I have been that chairman in the past. I have re-upped. I had to term out for for 2 years, simply because we do have a situation where you can only be on the commission for 9 years. So I have a great deal of experience in terms of being involved with historic preservation. And at this point, I did prepare a PowerPoint, and I hope that it hits home with you. As you can see, your community has a tremendous assets. You have tremendous historic preservation, things that really, really need to be preserved. And currently you have 7 structures that are on the National Registry of Historic Places. And I don't want to steal any of Julie's thunder, but you need to have a Historic Preservation Commission according to the Wisconsin state statutes that were developed in the 1990s, because you do have 2 or more National Registry historic places. And by state law, any city, municipality, or village is required to have a Historic Preservation Commission. While that is enforceable, it is not necessarily enforced in our state. So you have moved in the right direction. You do have an Historic Preservation Commission. I wanted to point out, I selected the Webster House because it has some significance. Certainly, it is part of the Walworth County Historical Society, and currently it is the only extant structure in the entire county that meets all of the qualifications of being on the National Registry. So it's a really important structure. Matt? The responsibilities of the Historic Preservation Commission. I have used photographs from Whitewater, and certainly it's pretty self-evident. Protection and enhancement and perpetuation of property of special historical interest and value. And you certainly have all of that here in our county seat. You need to identify and designate landmarks and historic districts. It's my understanding that the city of Elkhorn, who happens to be our county seat, does not have any historic districts at this time. So it would be my suggestion that you move forward towards doing some of this. Of course, you need to promote and preserve and protect all historic resources in the city. And one of the other things that you need to do as a Historic Preservation Commission is you need to focus on educating the public about local history and historic places. Historic Preservation Commission. As a Historic Preservation Commission, you're actually a government entity. You've been established by municipal ordinance, which provides a procedure for the designation and protection of historic properties. Now, my understanding is, in your situation, your Historic Preservation Commission is a commission that recommends and then cannot make a decision on their own. The recommendation goes to your Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission has the ultimate authority to determine, excuse me, if a structure or a place meets the qualifications. The Historic Preservation Commission itself, within the ordinance, should have that right to do so. And obviously, in order to do things like this, you need to have a nomination process, public notification of nominations, and the opportunity for written and oral public comment on the nomination. Wisconsin Act 176 requires that all decisions of the Historic Preservation Commission have an appeal process. So if, in fact, the Historic Preservation eventually had the right to make their own decision, rather than having to go through the Planning Commission, there still would be an appeal process for people that would want to, shall we say, opt out of being perhaps a landmark. What is a landmark? Obviously, these would qualify for being landmarks. Your Elkhorn bandshell is now on the National Registry and has been. The Elkhorn House is on the National Registry. And the Walworth County History Center, which is your former City Hall. All of these could be landmarks. One of the things that is very beneficial when you do have a Historic Preservation Commission is becoming a certified local government. And at this time, you are not. In order to be a certified local government, again, the Historic Preservation Commission would have to be able to make their own decisions, rather than having to go through and have ultimately the Planning Commission decide. So, first off, as a certified local government, you would have to be certified by the Department of the Interior and also by the Wisconsin State Historical Preservation Office, which is part of the Wisconsin State Historical Society. You have to have a qualified historic preservation, excuse me, commission, which has been established by ordinance, and you do have that at this time. I believe you just need to update that ordinance. And of course, you need to enforce state or local legislation for the designation and protection of your historic properties. You also need to maintain a survey and inventory of local historic resources. And I do bring the way we do it in the city of Whitewater. There are many, many ways to do it, but we do have a folder that includes all of our historic properties and landmarks. And then you do need to allow for public participation in your historic preservation program. And at this point, you do that. Within the state of Wisconsin, there are certain things that you do have to follow as a certified local government. And one, you have to enact and enforce an ordinance that regulates historic properties. You have to provide annual reporting to the State Historic Preservation Office at the Wisconsin Historical Society, and it's very easy to do. You also need to send your copies of agendas and meeting minutes to what we call SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office. And certainly the designation of certain areas can be done without the owner's consent. It would be my preference that before you did anything like that, you always seek the owner's consent, but you don't have to. And then the historic preservation must approve work on locally designated properties. So that, again, goes back to the fact that you really would have a historic preservation commission that can make its own decisions and not put the onus on the planning commission. What are the benefits? Certainly grant funding. The State Historic Preservation Office up in Madison allows for grant funding that you can apply for. You might want to know that recently the Lake Geneva Historic Preservation Commission received a $30,000 grant from the State Historic Preservation Office for an archaeological investigation of what was formerly the Hillmore Golf Course. You are able to get economic development with tax credits. Certainly, tax credits would be beneficial to homeowners or places, things like that, or business owners. It also enables you to develop a certain kind of identity where residents know that you are really interested, and businesses know that you are really interested in historic preservation. So that's a plus. And then, of course, you have access to people who really have expertise. Expertise in the areas of restoration and rehabilitation, certainly archaeology, state and federal policies that they can guide you, as well as architecture. All of this is available at the Wisconsin State Historical Society Preservation Office. All of these people are experts, and they are more than willing to help you. And then, of course, you have the validation of the historic preservation activity. They'll keep you running on a smooth track. I mean, if you need help, if you need assistance in any way, they're there to help you. And then, of course, you have the local review of a nomination to the National Register of Historic Places. If you're wishing to establish a historic district here in the city, you can go to them and they will be able to review and assist you with what you want to do. I would consider becoming a certified local government. And in order to do that, there is a manual available through the State Historic Preservation Office. I would suggest that you investigate that manual. It's 14 pages. It's very, very specific. And the individual that would be most helpful in this situation would be Jason Tisch, who happens to be in charge of the State Historic Preservation Office. And he's very, very easy to work with. Thank you for reserving the past for the future. I hope you'll consider, shall we say, amending or revising your code, your ordinance, and move towards updating it. I think it would be a really wise idea, and then certainly becoming a certified local government. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pat. What a wonderful thing you did sharing your information with us. We appreciate it. I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants here on who to call on or who has. Would you like to go next, Julie?
Okay. Pat covered, my name is Julie Taylor. I chair the Historic Preservation Commission. It is not my first time doing so. I chaired in the early 2000s for 10 years. During that tenure, the city had a surplus of money, and we did a grant program for the core downtown businesses, the storefronts. And during that time, we did 18 grants to those property owners and gave out $178,000. We also got on the National Register the municipal building downtown and the band shell. I am an Elkhornite. And so I am very familiar with the history of Elkhorn, and therefore I decided to, the mayor came to me and asked if I would, after I was on city council for 5 terms, and also on plan commission, so I know what you do. And I also chaired HPC for that time, and was the liaison person to the, there was a group called the Elkhorn Downtown Partnership. At that time, that group was made up of the building owners and the business owners in the immediate downtown. And then separate was, I think, and I may be saying, it was, I think, Elkhorn Development Corporation. Am I right? Do you remember that one, Ken?
I think you're right.
Yep, and they really concentrated on the business park and, you know, McDonald's and things on the north side of town. They didn't come into the core downtown area. That's why there was this separate group that was dealt with that. Why we exist, Pat covered that it's a state statute, 62.23, and it was from 1993. That, you know, places, communities that have historic, National Historic Register buildings have to adopt the ordinance no later than 1995, which that included the creation of a commission. State statute 44.34 said that the Wisconsin Historical Society must prepare and distribute to all municipalities by January 1st, 1992, a model historic preservation ordinance. When I found that, that triggered something with me, because I knew that the first Historic Preservation Commission meeting was held in 1989 in Elkhorn. I contacted Jason Tisch, who, as Pat mentioned, he's the Certified Local Government and Preservation Education Coordinator at the State Historical Society, and he is the code person. He knows, you know, all the original codes for the municipalities. And so I inquired as to how old our code is. My guess being 1989, because that was when the first meeting was held. He said I was correct. Our code is from the 1980s. And so it is quite out of date. These days, the ordinance models are more nuanced and far better, you know, than the old one. Additionally, the codes today relieve the architectural review and the plan commission from any and all burdens. So today, we are strictly an advisory group for you. We do your legwork. That's why in the past, back in the prior tenure, as well as this past fall, you got a certificate of appropriateness from us. And that's what you saw originated from us doing all of the research. And then you just approve it if you agree. Okay. One of the things you probably don't realize that in the past, there certainly were times when an individual would get in touch with me and say, I don't even know where to start. And the first thing I would say is go to the, I was going to say Webster House, but the Historical Society, and get a picture of the property, an old picture, as to what it really looked like in the very beginning, as best you can. And then we would start walking that person through, you know, the different options they had to redo their facade. We would help them choose out their paint colors using historic groupings from, you know, the regular paint companies. And and I don't know if any of you want to do that. It takes a lot of time, and it's a lot of legwork doing it, meeting with the applicant perhaps a number of times. All of our HBC members are people who are all interested in history. Lisa Brilliantine and Jim Boardman, both are on the Walworth County Historical Society Board. John Gunyon is in charge of Hazel Ridge Cemetery. Gary Welsh is the former city engineer and is still an engineer and owner of historic homes. Jean Carroll has been president of the library board and the library foundation member. I previously 10 years as the HBC chair. My own personal property is on the National Register of Historic Places. And I'm a former board member of the Walworth County Historical Society. And Peter Harvey is our common council member, and he also lives in a historic older home. So we all like history. By taking all of the burden from you, the entire process of the applicant is streamlined. It's only one place to go. Not going through us to get everything together and compiling everything for you, and then coming before the Plan Commission for the approval in the end. So we have plans. We want to make Holden Heights a National Register district. When the Highway 12 and 67 project was done, Heritage Research Limited surveyed the area and discovered Holden Heights. Findings were reported to the State Historical Society, and since I returned last August, I've gotten a copy of Heritage's report, along with a preliminary National Register approval by the State Historical Society. So it's Holton Manor, the original house, and all those bungalows. There's 37 total parcels. We want to get the downtown on the National Register of Historic Places. Elkhorn is very far behind all of our neighboring communities. The downtowns of Darien, Delavan, Whitewater, Lake Geneva, Burlington, and Milton are all on it. And we are the county seat and are not. A complete historic preservation program includes designation of the historic downtown in the National Register of Historic Places. The designation places, there's no additional burden on the properties, and it makes the owners eligible for state and federal tax credits worth up to 40% of most of their costs. Additionally, we want to become, as Pat's presentation, a certified local government, which opens up more avenues for us to get monetary sources. It opens up grants for us to do surveys and districts and National Register nominations. And so my suggestion is, given that the fact that our code is so old, that we get a new code model from the State Historical Society and see what it says. And the other thing is, Jason said the other way he would approach it is he would take our existing code and update it in order to get it up to what's going on in 2025. Thank you.
Okay. Julie, I've got one question for you. Did I understand this right? If the downtown area was designated a historic, on the historic register as a downtown, the district, then a property owner wants to do something on his building, he'd be eligible for tax credits even though his building specifically wouldn't be on the National Register or State Register. That's what I heard, and I just wasn't sure if I understood it correctly. Okay, thank you. I think there's been some confusion about the what we call the candy stripe map.
Yes.
Allison, you
Yeah.
look like you're chomping at the bit here.
I
Yeah,
can touch on that a little bit. So there's a couple of different things that you heard in Pat's presentation and Julie's presentation that are very valid. As you know, the Historic Preservation District kind of just started back up this last year. And we haven't had a Historic Preservation Committee in quite some time before that. So our ordinance has always been in place, but it's been very stagnant. It hasn't been updated. And when the Historic Preservation Commission started back up, we didn't touch our ordinance. It was there. And it was active, so it probably is pretty outdated. I can agree to that. And so there's a couple of different things that have come up while we are sorting all this out, since it is new and we need to kind of come together and find a solution for a really streamlined process for all Plan Commission projects, all HPC projects. We did realize that our current ordinance states that the Historic Preservation Committee acts as an advisory board to the Plan Commission, just like the Plan Commission acts as an advisory board to the council. They give us recommendations, we take those recommendations into consideration, and then we kind of make the final approval. It sounds like what I'm hearing tonight is the HPC would potentially like some ordinance amendments to take us out of that equation. Instead of them acting more as just an advisory board, they would be more of the determining commission in some of the HPC projects. That's one component of this discussion. Another component of this discussion is that when the HPC started back up, we had found that we don't really have a map on file of an accurate or approved historic preservation district. As Pat stated, right now in Elkhorn, we don't have any landmarks that have been kind of addressed by the HPC or by the Plan Commission. We don't have any historic sites that are mapped, and we don't have any current districts that are mapped by the city. So right now, I think the HPC and some of the members of the HPC, and correct me if I'm wrong, had maybe thought that this candy cane striped area, which Matt, if you could zoom in on the map that you have, our downtown district has this white and red striped area over it, and that is what we call our Central Place Overlay District. There's been some confusion surrounding this overlay, and I think some people thought that it was a historic overlay district, and we realized that it's not. The Central Place Overlay District is currently, per our ordinance, enforced by the Architectural Review Board, and the Plan Commission currently acts as the Architectural Review Board. So there's a couple of different components to this conversation and discussion that we need to have. One would be any code amendments and updates that would be required to bring our HPC code kind of up to par with the new standards. But number two would be, right now the HPC doesn't have anything, they have no districts, they have no mapped district, they have no mapped landmarks or no mapped historical sites. So at this point, there's nothing that can go to HPC for even advisory. That is kind of what we found, and anyone feel free to jump in if I'm missing anything, but from all of our research, that's kind of what we found right now. So I know that HPC is important. I know that we need to have it, but one of the discussions we need to have is, I think, does the Plan Commission feel that the Central Place Overlay District, which is primarily our downtown district, do we feel that the Central Place Overlay District should be enforced by the Architectural Review Board, i.e. you all, Or do we feel that that is an area that should be converted into a historical district and turned over to the HPC, whether they're acting as an advisory or whether we amend our ordinance and allow them to do the approvals? That's up to you all, and I would look to our attorney for any feedback as well. But that is one of the questions that we have is, do we feel like that area is suited to be a historic district, knowing that it is our downtown area, and that then would give the HPC an opportunity to be involved in those projects?
Allison?
Yeah.
Can I
Yeah,
speak?
go ahead, Julie.
Okay. Why this is so confusing. Back in 2009, it was November of 2009, a resolution was adopted by the city for architectural design for the downtown Central Place Overlay District. Tesco was in charge of this. There was a meeting. I was in the meeting along with Sam Tapson, the former city administrator, and our representative from Tesco, which was Lee Brown, I want to say. Am I right on that?
Yes.
Okay, the three of us. And at the time I was in the meeting, I said, if somebody said to you, it's the downtown Central Place Overlay District, and that was it, that's the name of it. What for? What's the point of it? It doesn't say it in the title of it. And the resolution itself says, quote, whereas the Plan Commission has determined that future development within the Central Place Overlay District should portray the existing historic character of the district, and whereas a set of design guidelines provides an effective tool for ensuring that future development does portray the historic character of the overlay district. So that's where you can understand why we took it as an historic district. And then attached to it, how many of you have seen this? It's a booklet. It's the guidelines that go with it. And the guidelines come from the State Historical Society. So that's part of the confusion. The other thing I did find, and Adam, you had sent me an email back, and the dates were when I was no longer with the city, so the dates weren't meaning anything to me, about whether this had ever been, whether there'd ever been a public hearing or anything else on this district. And I think it was just some old information that someone had found, and what was it? It didn't mean anything to me because, like I said, I wasn't around at that time. I did find that back in September of 2009, mention was made that there was going to be an open house for the public on October 1st. And then on October 1st, there's actually 4 people in the room that were in attendance on October 1st. And that was myself, and it was Gary Welsh, our city engineer. And of course, Sherry was there because she was the secretary then, as she is now. And the mayor was there. Tim Schroeder was on the Plan Commission. And TESCA held the public hearing. TESCA wouldn't have created something without a public hearing. It wasn't their style. And so then it went on to, it was in conjunction with a rezone of some properties. And so I'm going to assume it was Lee Brown. Yes, it was. His name is in here. Lee Brown from TESCA. He then went in right after the rezoning part, of which there were a couple of people that wanted their zoning to change the same and all stay the same, etc. Then after that, he went into this the overlay district. That's what I found. And then in November 5th, there was the resolution on the Architectural Review Board and Plan Commission. And in the end, Mayor John Giese, at that time, the Plan Commission chairman, signed the resolution, and Common Council approved it on November 16th, it looks like. Excuse me, they first reviewed everything on November 16th, and the ordinance then was passed on December 7th of 2009. That's the information I found on it.
So Julie, I guess I served on the Historic Preservation Committee too,
Yes, you did.
back in those days.
Yes.
Or what you just described, was that the authority that the HPC worked off of in those
Yes.
days when we approved all those grants for downtown businesses? It acted as an advisory capacity.
Yes.
Okay.
So a lot of those certificates of appropriateness were going through the Plan Commission, for you just to approve after we had done all of the meetings with the applicants, et cetera, and provided you with your certificate of appropriateness.
Okay. Adam?
Yeah, and I think the point is, I think what Julie just summarized actually confirms what we've been saying, which is throughout the entire zoning process, back in 2009, when the city was changing the rezoning, or I should say, changing the zoning of the downtown business area, the council intentionally created a central place overlay district, invested that authority in the Architectural Review Board, which is doing that duty. If there was a misunderstanding at the time in terms of having the HPC involved, it was a misunderstanding. But the point being, there's still no historic preservation overlay district map that was ever approved. So I just want to make that clear in terms of what was just discussed. And that's why there was confusion last fall, because we were told there was a map, there wasn't a map, there was a map, there wasn't a map. And finally, we figured out that there was not a map. And that's why, earlier when Julie mentioned, yes, the HPC did look at 2 projects that were proposed downtown for improvements. That was deemed because of, at the time, we were told that the HPC had that authority, but no overlay map is been approved, and so I think that's why Allison is saying that one of the decisions that the Planning Commission and the council have to make is to whether to vest the historic, I should say, almost stood up myself, whether the central overlay planning district has to, whether that authority should remain with Architectural Review Board, or whether that needs to go to somebody else, whether that's the HPC. So that's one of the big questions.
Can I bring up something? Wasn't there a historic preservation district quite extensive around the downtown and all the way south that just disappeared from the map about a month ago?
Yeah, that was, Gary, we could not figure, and Adam we couldn't find anything as to how that was ever created, where it ever came from.
Somebody just decided to put it on a map?
And the only thing that I can think of, see, to me, that doesn't sound grotesque either.
It doesn't make any sense, but.
No, it didn't make
No,
any sense at
'cause
all.
Not that I agreed with the district, because it was quite extensive.
Yeah,
But
it wasn't something
I think
that you
it
would
came
do.
out of Teska's research. But I also heard there was a somewhat of a purge at City Hall that eliminated a lot of records too at some point. That maybe the records just got purged. And there really is a district out there somewhere, but maybe you can't prove it today. But I think by what you talked about, in my recollection from being on the Historic Preservation Commission, is that Central Place Overlay District was intended to go to the Historic Preservation Commission. Without a doubt. I mean, there was no question.
I think at this point, the best thing to do, because there has been such a lapse in time, and we did investigate this pretty heavily. The best thing ultimately at this point is to start fresh, go by the book. If we need to make ordinance amendments, let's make ordinance amendments. If we need to update our maps and designate a district to the HPC, let's do it. But at this point, we're all here in this room because we just want to work together, and we want to get it done the right way this time, so that you all can can enforce these projects that are occurring in these areas that are really important to the city.
As I said previously, I think it would be my recommendation that whether it's myself or whether it's Adam, we get in touch with Jason and get some of the, models of the new ordinances and how they read today in comparison to what they were. And as I said, he's also willing to go through our present ordinance and rewrite what's necessary to get it up to today's standards.
Can you go just a little bit north on the map so we show Rockwell? Sorry, to the south, I mean. Rockwell?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you say Rockwell, that was nice.
There you go. So 2 of the 7 that we have are not part of this yet. We still have historic signs on the Rockwell, Lincoln light posts saying the area is over there. So at some point in time, my guess, the 2 areas that we talked about in the slideshow must have been on a map, or how did they get things on the light posts that say historic preservation over here?
I'm not familiar with that, are you, Julie?
I'm not familiar with it either.
If you
But
just
that
drive
would've
down
been-
Lincoln Street, there's a sign right on it pointing towards the house.
Oh, those are probably from those house lots?
Oh.
Yeah, they like
Years,
little,
I'm just saying,
years
if we put it up
ago.
on top of light posts, it had to have city approval at that time.
I don't know.
Yes, right in the corner of Lincoln and Rockwell.
My guess is that those signs are specific to individual properties that may have historic value, but that's different than the historic preservation overlay district we were just talking about. So the city, per request of different properties in town, including churches and otherwise, the city's allowed different sites of significance, if you will, to have signage, so.
Well, Jason, don't you live right on that corner?
Yes. Yeah, right in between the 2.
Yeah, Rockwell and Lincoln, yeah. I'm gonna have to take a ride and
Yeah.
look at the poles. Yeah.
They're just
Unless it-
Webster House, is that?
Well, maybe it's directional.
Yeah, up on the light posts.
Yeah.
There's also one on the roadside that's there, and they're doing construction on the Webster House as we speak. Yeah, so that post right there.
Yeah, Chuck, I mean, so I think it's,
Right there.
yeah, you find it? If you back up, there you go.
What does it say?
I mean,
I don't know, Google didn't.
That's what I.
I do agree that based on what we've found, it
Oh,
sounds
it's
as
the
though,
Webster, that's the Webster House.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
a way,
that's National Register property.
yeah.
That's the museum. So,
And the octagon's on the other side of the road.
yeah.
I think those are just directional
Yeah.
signs to the historic sites. I don't think that necessarily means there was ever a map established in the city, though.
No, and I would say that even if it wasn't just a directional sign, we can't really rely on just the signage anyhow. We would need a map, we would need the process establishing, showing that it was formally established. So I do think that that's where we're at. It sounds like, for whatever reason, the Common Council made the decision back in 2009 to vest sort of authority with the ARB. Doesn't mean that can't be changed, but that's the policy call ultimately for the Common Council. So it seems like there's really 2 issues that you're kind of looking at here. One was whether you want to change the ordinance to maybe bring in some more modern standards, which kind of begs the question then as to what those standards are. I mean, obviously you can't really make that decision until you know potentially what that would involve. And then the other option would be creating some sort of a district for the Historic Preservation Commission to kind of have some authority over. Seems to me you could actually go either way with it. You could look at changing the code first, and then expanding the geographic boundaries, or you could create the geographic boundaries under the current structure where everything's advisory and see how that works for a while. it sounds as though, and I'm kind of coming at this relatively fresh, but it sounds as though your historic commission really hasn't been active until the last year or so. So there's not really much of a track record that anybody has to work off of, at least not recently. So sometimes there's a benefit to trying out the ordinance as it's currently written, see what works, what doesn't work, and then modify it from there. Again, with there not being currently any district that the commission has any sort of authority over, it would really be truly advisory at this point. I mean, the planning commission would have to affirmatively refer things out, things that were historic or touched on historic structures, refer it out to the planning commission, get a recommendation, and go from there, because it's nothing that would happen automatically, because frankly the district doesn't exist. So now so the planning commission can certainly affirmatively assign that out. There's timelines though that you guys have to operate within as well. When people make applications, they have the right to have those things processed in a timely manner as well. So that complicates that process. So.
One thing I will say is, one reason why this is important to make a decision on, what ultimately the Plan Commission would like to do, is because we do have a lot of properties in the downtown area that have upcoming projects, improvement projects, facade projects, projects, that they would like to move forward with. And as we've navigated this section of our ordinance and made mistakes by sending a couple of projects already to HPC and then finding out that they shouldn't have gone to HPC and instead, to Plan Commission, we're kind of, anyone who, might have to come to the HPC or the Plan Commission, we're kind of putting them through the ringer right now. We don't have a definitive process set. I'm confusing downtown property owners. They're wondering what is going on here. And so the faster we can set a standardized process, the better, so that applicants know exactly what they need to do and where they need to go to seek their approvals.
Yeah, I would just say that, even if the HBC isn't formally in the process right now, because it doesn't have any jurisdiction, to the extent you have public hearings, obviously you can do your legwork, you can bring in the information, and still inform the planning commission that way. Or even if it's not a public hearing, you have public comment periods, they can submit information that way, so it doesn't have to be formalized, but to the extent that the city wanted to have a formalized process, then that's some changes that we make.
Any other members have questions or comments? One of my concerns is the, having served on the planning commission for many years ago, and being the mayor now, all my colleagues here on the planning commission, I'm not sure we're really up to doing an architectural review at the spur of the moment when we see the plans. And so I don't know how you want to go. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe you want to dig into it, but any thoughts on that?
Well, I think the people that are here tonight are more than qualified than any of us that are sitting up here. So to make decisions, on downtown or any area like that, I would respect their input and their decisions. That's where I'm at. I agree.
Yeah, I think the same thing. I agree they'd be better off than us. I almost think this is a long time coming, from what I've heard so far. And to be honest, I absolutely agree with you. Yeah, this might be something that probably needs to come to a head.
So if I'm hearing that the Planning Commission Architectural Review Board wants the HPC to be involved in this, it's also got to be streamlined.
Yes.
So, I think that's a solution. I just want to make sure we set some standards that it's streamlined for the property owner's benefit.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have to have some standards, and I think that with, like I see the people that are on there getting that set up, and with Allison, I guess they're more than capable of doing it.
Yeah. Right now, the way that our current ordinance is written, if there was a historic district established, for example, if the candy cane striped area, we decided tonight to hand that over to the HPC and start that formal process. Obviously, there's a process. And it would likely involve public hearings and additional joint meetings. But if we started that process and we said, we want you to have authority over that district, and that should be designated as a historic district, then my question would be, our current ordinance has the HPC acting as an advisory board. So if that district was then handed over as a historic district, anyone within that district wanting to make any improvement, so maybe changing the paint color or doing some exterior work on their building, they would need to apply for a certificate of appropriateness through the HPC. And right now, they would act as an advisory board, so it would go from the HPC. The HPC would recommend to the Plan Commission, and Plan Commission would make the final determination. And I guess I'd be looking for some feedback as to if you like that process, if you like, that the HPC acts as an advisory board to the Plan Commission, or if you feel that they should be the authority and they should be making the final determination of that project, and that it would not come to the Plan Commission after.
That was what I meant, that it doesn't come before us.
Okay.
That they would make the decision, if it was picking out a color or whatever it's involved, and not come before the planning commission.
Can I jump in on it for a second here?
Sure can.
'Cause, we bought our house about 15 years ago, and I've finally found pictures of what the original carriage house looked at our house. And by current ordinance, we can only go 750 square feet with a roof peak of 15. And that's not even close to what it looked like. So those are some of the problems we may anticipate having, that somebody comes in, wants a new garage, and he wants to look like it originally did, but it's almost 14 feet less than what the original one looked like. So that, again, I don't know where this all lies and who says yes or no, but it's a significant difference than just colors of paint.
Yeah, I understand that, you're right.
Well, and, Mayor, I guess, from an administrative / procedural process, I understand that some of the members may not feel like they are, I don't want to say qualified, but don't want to get, into deeming whether something's appropriate or not. But I guess our concerns are that if the planning commission divests your involvement in this process, it could create problems for a couple of reasons. One, certainly right now we have people on the HPC who are motivated to, be involved, but it's obviously not a highly compensated position. Obviously, there's no compensation right now.
Zero.
Right. So you're relying on volunteers to be doing it, and the reality is you may not have volunteers once the current group. And now what has happened? You've created a process by which a group of volunteers are now in charge of your doing projects downtown, and there's no oversight and no other way for the city to get those projects moving forward. So I think there's a lot of value in keeping it in an advisory capacity where you can make a recommendation, and if a certain period of time, whether it's 30 days, 45 days, whatever period of time that is, there's no action, then the planning commission can then step in. Because otherwise, again, if things fall through because, again, volunteerism is in short supply, it just is going to put our, whoever's in those districts at a disadvantage. So that just would be my, suggestion or comment about it.
I think all the years I was on, it was advisory, and that seemed to work well. Hate to disagree, Ken.
Can I interject something here?
Sure.
We cannot become a certified local government if we are advisory. We
If you
lose
are
out on
just an
that.
advisory.
Pardon?
Couldn't hear
We
you.
cannot become a certified local government
Yes.
and then have access to grant money to fund developing a district. having the survey done, then hiring Carol Cartwright to write all the nomination paperwork and everything else for it. We can't get our hands on that money if we are strictly advisory. We have to be our own entity.
Which also means taking the common council out?
Pardon?
Which also means taking the common council out? So you'd still have an advisory role to the common council?
No, I don't believe so. They would make their final determination. It would be a one meeting approval or denial process.
That's not, that could be structured differently though, right? I mean, and I'm just kind of spitballing here, but you could set up a situation where the HPC has authority for a certain period of time, and then if action isn't taken, then it's kicked up to the common council, or to the planning commission and then up to the common council.
The if I may interject, the HPC would ultimately have final authority in dealing with landmarks and with National Registry structures. However, the Common Council ultimately has the authority. In other words, there could always be appeals to your Common Council. So they're not out of the picture at all. The important thing is to remember, as Julie told you, you cannot become a certified local government unless the HPC has authority to make the decisions, rather than put the onus on your planning commission or your architectural commission. So it's kind of a catch-22, really, when you get right down to it. And as far as volunteers go on your historic planning commission, you have a quorum, correct? You do. You have to. I'm quite certain that you'll always have an HPC commission.
Well, I guess it fell by the wayside for 10 years, so I think that the track record would suggest otherwise, but.
Can I tell you why?
I'm just saying it was not around for 10 years.
Yeah. What happened was when I left after my 5 terms on city council, the next mayor, the chair of the HPC is appointed by the mayor. And I told, it was Howie Reynolds, I said, you've got to appoint somebody to replace me because you've got to have an HPC. It's under state statutes. Well, he didn't, and whoever the next person was didn't, and the next person didn't. So that's why it was dead for about 15 years. That's when Tim came back to me and said, please resurrect it. We're in violation of the state laws.
Well, I won't. I don't know if the mayor. I think
You started the ball rolling.
I don't know. I don't know if I'd say that the mayor. I don't know if the mayor was probably that emphatic about it being resurrected. But regardless, I'll let the mayor speak for himself. But again, the concern is just we want to make sure that the people who are in this district who are trying to do projects have a smooth process and that they have the support. And the reality is having a full-time paid staff to be able to help people who need help and are trying to do projects is important. I mean, right now, people already get frustrated and feel like they can't get their projects done soon enough. And I know Katie's itching to say a lot on this subject, but Katie's working with a lot of the downtown businesses that are trying to do projects. They're trying to do projects through grant funds through the EEDA. And, those people have said, and I know they've told Katie that, they've told me this, that, if they get jerked around and they feel like, they're having to do a lot of hurdles, they're just not going to do it. And then now you're going to have people, buildings that are not getting improved. So whatever process we do, it just needs to be something where people feel like they can submit an application, it can be heard in a reasonable period of time, and that if it doesn't move forward, that there's another avenue. And, I know there's a conversation about, well, just have the city council be the backup if, for some reason that the HBC doesn't do what they're supposed to. But if I'm hearing tonight that the planning commission feels like they don't want to be involved in making decisions about, color patterns and stuff, I'm pretty confident the council isn't going to be involved in that. And so that's really more of a planning commission role than it is a council to sit, in terms of just the council's got a ton of business that they have to deal with. So that's a danger with having the council just be the, sort of the safeguard.
guess I would offer up that maybe, and again, this is a policy call, it's not really my place either way, but just since there was this gap where the HPC wasn't effective, and I understand why that was, but maybe there would be a benefit to restarting it essentially in an advisory role to, let the process play out, and once the planning commission becomes comfortable that, yeah, you guys have it, everything's working great, then maybe there's more comfort to switch over to a different model where they actually do have authority to actually make the decision. Essentially, if you reach the point where the planning commission is basically just rubber stamping what you guys are saying, then after a while, like, what's the point of that? We'll just have you guys make the call. But right now, just because there isn't that track record, and I realize that means you can't become a certified community right away, but if that happens, then at that point, the change could be made. But at this point, there's just not really a track record for obvious reasons, but it's just not there still. Someone else?
If I can interject something, the way you're suggesting to do it is the way we were doing it last fall, and Katie was having all sorts of problems with downtown owners who felt they were getting the runaround. So I think you have to kind of make a commitment one way or the other. Either the HPC has the authority or the HPC, because I think, Katie, you probably speak this better than I can, but they seem to, I don't think to put you on the spot, but they seem like they.
Hi, everybody. I'm Katie James. I'm the grant writer for the City of Elkhorn, the Elkhorn Chamber of Commerce, and the Elkhorn Area School District. Since 2002, I've been given 3 targets for improvement in the City of Elkhorn. Number 1 was the improvement of the look of our downtown. So I have spent the last 2.5 years working with our downtown property owners to encourage improvement, to encourage the look, to gain their trust, to gain a greater understanding with Allison and zoning and ordinances. And we finally hit the top of the hill last summer as far as people getting excited again, getting excited to improve their buildings downtown, to make downtown something special. And that's when the HPC really came into our awareness that it existed, that it needed to exist, and how we can make it work for our community. Our property owners heard another regulatory body that was going to tell them what they should do to their properties downtown. I think that in talking with Julie, she is a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of advice on what downtown can look like. And I really rely on her, and I think we all should rely on this committee to give that guidance on how great downtown can look. I also want there to be a solid and firm understanding on the economic development of the center of our town and what we can do to help these properties become successful, and what we can do as a community and make it a collaborative process on how we can make our downtown strong again. Julie, you were singing to the rooftops about one application. I love that. Our downtown property owners last fall had to complete 3 separate applications if they wanted to replace a window in their storefront. That's the level of guidance that we have right now. We eliminated one and then threw in another. And I can see it. I can see the enthusiasm waning already just in, I don't have time to go through with that. I'm trying to run my restaurant. I'm trying to run a law firm here. And you want me to go through 3 phases to talk about changing a paint color in my property. It's easiest for them to do nothing. And I don't ever want us to be there again. So you talking about a streamlined process, absolutely love it. Just give me the form. You talking about the planning commission makes a quick decision so that they can start their projects this year. Last week alone, I met with 5 different property owners that are now anxious to do projects in our downtown. I want the city of Elkhorn to be as strong a partner to that improvement as possible. So whatever you decide tonight, I am all in for. I just need one of you or some of you to tell me what that looks like so that I can give them the guidance. The 2009 design plan that Julie has, and I have a copy of, most of our property owners were not aware of it, have never seen it. We've had such a level of turnover in our downtown that when that was put in place, those folks are gone. So for me to say, I'm so excited for you to replace your windows, here's a 14-page document that now tells you all the regulations you have to abide by to do that improvement. The look that they give me, it looks like they want to laugh. Like, well, then never mind then, I'm not going to do that. But we sit down, it's a conversation. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about what your building was. I start with old pictures of it, it becomes a conversation. And then eventually we get there. I want to paint my building green. I want to paint my building red. Julie's already given me the secret book of what those colors are that were great during that time. So I just go, oh great, let's talk about greens. Here's some greens. And then they'll go, oh, I'll pick that one. That sort of thing. That's the collaborative process that I'm looking for here. And if we're going to talk about the Candy Stripe District, we have several of our business owners that have zero awareness that this is something that they need this certificate of appropriateness. What is appropriate? It raises all sorts of questions. So I'm really looking for some guidance here as to what is appropriate, what that looks like. The 2009 document, I would love to take a set of fresh eyes on that. It's been 17 years. A lot of downtown design has shifted since that time. But I've got people that want to do projects this year, particularly on South Wisconsin Street. I have 4 different businesses. I think we can all agree that could use a refresh. So if we can talk and work through this process as quickly as possible, I'd be great. I'd be very appreciative of your efforts. Does anyone have any questions for me about what folks are interested in and what they want to do? I've been going to the downtown businesses have restarted a group. I know that Kelly Odling came in a couple of weeks ago to speak to City Council about it. I attended their meeting on Monday. It was with great enthusiasm that they were hearing that the city wanted to be a partner and that we wanted to help their businesses and their properties be successful. So I'm very eager and excited to hear these conversations. I hope it's been very productive because I've learned a lot just tonight. But as someone who's in the mix, going to a property owner now and saying, what are we doing? How do we move forward? How do we encourage them to develop our community and invest in our community? Because these projects are $20,000, $30,000, $50,000, and they can just as easily do nothing. And that's the last thing I think we can all agree we want.
Thank you, Katie.
And sorry, just Alderman Harvey, just to address your point, I think part of the issue was that the reason that there was frustration among some of those businesses last summer and fall was because they kept being told, we were told initially, no map, there's a map, there's no map, there's a map. So the issue was, is the HPC involved and not involved? And so for us, that I think was the big problem, was that we didn't have a clear answer as to who has the authority, who doesn't have the authority. So
Right, but there was all that delay back and forth that the business owners were getting frustrated about, you know, and so that's where I said, I think I'm not opposed to the process as long as it's more streamlined so we can get them to redevelop in their property.
Can I interject? I think that, you know, HPC would really like to become quasi-judicial so that we just operate as our own entity. We do all of the legwork and gathering up the information and have worked with Katie before, and then we make the final decision. And then we make up the certificate of appropriateness, which a copy goes to the property owner and another copy goes to Allison. And more than happy to give a copy to you so that you know what's going on, so that you're not caught off guard on some project. But as I said, if it stays the same that we are strictly advisory, and then it has to go to the Plan Commission. I'm trying to get it streamlined so it's one stop, that's it, for these people.
I did take a look at the surrounding communities ordinances. So as Pat mentioned, there are other communities surrounding us that are certified local governments, which I don't know a whole lot about. I don't have any experience with that, but the city of Burlington's ordinance and the city of Whitewater's ordinance allow the HPC to act on their own authority. They do not act as an advisory in those communities. And what they have in their ordinance is an appeal process, which in Pat's presentation, she mentioned is required. So if the Plan Commission is leaning towards allowing the HPC to have their own authority to make decisions on their districts and their mapped landmark sites, the appeal process portion of the ordinance could state that to appeal the decision made by HPC, they would come to the Plan Commission. That's how the City of Burlington's ordinance is written, that if HPC denies a project, it comes to the Plan Commission as the appeal. The City of Whitewater's ordinance is written that the appeal process goes straight to council. So I've seen both. If there is any discussion or possible action tonight on how the Plan Commission wants to move forward after this discussion, then I would, advise us to work with our city attorney, with the recommendations of the HPC, with the recommendations of Plan Commission. And in addition to that, I know Julie has mentioned that there is someone at a state level who has welcomed assistance with an ordinance, rewrite. I would suggest that, we take their feedback into consideration, but ultimately work with our city attorney.
Allison, and the appeal that goes to the Planning Commission, is there, you may not know this, I'm sure you just looked it up on the fly, but is there the option to appeal then to Common Council beyond that, or is that the last stage?
There is.
Okay, so you're adding in potentially a little time there. But I guess from a legal perspective, and again, this is policy stuff, as you guys get to decide it, but I think what I'd like everybody to kind of keep in mind on is that ultimately, the only folks who are actually elected here are on the Common Council. So when it comes to balancing, historic concerns versus development concerns versus all those issues, from a governance perspective, as a lawyer, I prefer to see those decisions made at the Common Council level. Because again, you guys are the ones who are elected, you're the ones who are answerable to the residents directly.
If I get the planning commission involved, just go straight to the council.
Absolutely.
Straight to the council. Rather than going back to the planning commission, if there's an appeal, just have it go, rather than go to us, just go straight to the council.
Sure. Julie, I have a question for,
Yeah.
how long for you to get the whole process done where you could make decisions on your own from the state level? Are we talking weeks, months, a year?
Change the ordinance. We would just have to change the ordinance. We'd have to get that updated.
Then you gotta
And
get
then-
certified or not? Or just by changing the ordinance, we become certified?
No,
No.
you have to apply for,
Right.
to become a certified local government.
Right.
That's another step. But in order to become certified, we have to be quasi-judicial. Okay? So just to answer two, certified local governments in this area, how many are there statewide?
Currently, there are 75 that belong to the Wisconsin Wisconsin Association of Historic Preservation Commissions. There are 75 in the state.
And the ones that are in our area are Beloit, Burlington, Janesville, Lake Geneva, Milton, Monroe, Mukwonago, Palmyra, and Whitewater.
So I guess the question is, how long would that take? And number two, are we talking that there has to be a district for you to run? Or
No,
can that just
no.
be citywide, you can do whatever you want to do as long as it's deemed historical?
Well, I think there's separate components to this. Is the first step would be an ordinance amendment based upon the discussion tonight. And so just a hypothetical, if the Plan Commission decides tonight they do not want the HPC to be advisory, you all decide that they would like to proceed, they're going to make their own decisions, we're going to stay out of it. We would have to do an ordinance amendment first to make that happen. In addition to that, once that ordinance is changed, right now the HPC has no mapped areas to enforce. So item number 2, they need to designate areas within the city that would be either historic districts or historic landmark sites. So it can either be a place or it can be a district. it sounds like the HPC wants to proceed with different districts. We have right now the Central Place overlay, which is in question tonight, whether or not we want to turn that over to HPC or keep it under Plan Commission. Number 2 would be the Holton area that Julie discussed earlier, that it sounds like in the future the HPC would like to work on that area as a mapped district. And number 3, any other outlier landmarks that they want to determine would be historic sites. All of that would have to go through its own separate process. So public hearings, all the property owners would need to get notified. So you're talking multiple months, a lot of time. So it would take time for the HPC to establish all the districts and all the landmark sites that they want.
Right, and I guess the question I'm asking, knowing all that, how long before they could get their ducks in a row for the rest of this to happen?
May I interject? Before establishment of historic districts and that sort of thing, the amendment would, or your code, or as I refer to it, your ordinance would have to be changed. And that could be relatively an easy change to give the Historic Preservation Commission the right, you know, not to be in an advisory capacity, but to be quasi-judicial. With that, I'm certain that your city council has a procedure that has for ordinance change. I don't know if it's introduced and then it's voted upon, and I don't know, do you vote 3 times or 2?
It'd be a zoning change, so we'd have to have a public hearing as part of that process as
Right.
well. And notices would have to be sent out and whatnot, but yeah, and then there'd be a planning commission recommendation.
So Jason, long story short, I don't know. We would work on the ordinance amendment. You know, that would take a little bit of time internally. We'd bring it back. We'd have a public hearing at Plan Commission. Probably would do a joint meeting similar to this. Have the public hearing for the ordinance amendment, then ordinance amendment moves on to council for final approval, first reading, second reading. It could take a little while, just depending upon how long it would take all of us to get on the same page
Right.
for that ordinance amendment.
Well, there was also discussion a little bit tonight about a model ordinance that's out there, an updated version of that. We could start with that, or we could try to blend these two together. We could, it's ultimately going to boil down to what the planning commission and the common council want to see. But to the extent there's a model ordinance, that's beneficial.
I mentioned the model ordinance. There may be a couple of them out there. And those come directly from the State Historical Society, from their area, that they write them for the communities across the state of Wisconsin. So if we can get some of those, whether there's 1, 2, or 3, and take a look at them and figure out which one fits the best. And but all of them have been done to make them ready for us to move on to become a CLG.
So just a question, so let's just say, for instance, we get this passed, change the ordinance, fast forward, go back to you, judicial. What is the process to getting, how long would that take then to get from there?
We have our application, and we meet once a month, and depending upon the timing of when the application is turned in, we meet the third Tuesday of the month. We make a determination if everything is, all the ducks are in a row. The next day, Allison has the certificate of appropriateness. Certificate of appropriateness goes out to the applicant, and they're ready to get their permits.
I guess I'm losing this in translation. How long is it going to take for the state or your ordinance to reflect that you can make the decision by yourself?
I think they're asking how long does the certified
How long does that take?
local government process take? So there's two steps. There's
We-
our ordinance.
We don't have to be CLG.
I think he's
That's-
asking is how long would it take to get to that CLG
Oh,
status?
to get that finished?
Yeah.
How long did it take Whitewater?
After the ordinance is changed and after you guys
Yeah.
have the authority that you need to be eligible for that.
We've been a certified local government since, well, I would say for 35 years.
Okay.
How long did it take to get there?
I was not in that position yet. So I cannot reflect, but I would say that it does not take an extraordinary amount of time. You simply have to apply. The Department of Interior looks over your ordinance, obviously. And again, your ordinance has to state that you are in a position to make the decision rather than to be in an advisory capacity. And then it goes to the state. And I would suspect it would be just a matter of a couple of months to become a certified local government. It may take much longer for you for your ordinance simply because you have to go through the process of your city council and ratification of that. But
What
may I just,
Government and the state.
well, and generally it would be handled specifically, probably more so by the state of Wisconsin, submitting your request to the Department of the Interior. It should not take long at all. And again, it would streamline your process. I mean, if Katie has these people downtown that are willing to do wonderful things and enhance your city, within the ordinance, it would be probably wise to state that your HPC, if you decide to give them full authority, would be able to have emergency meetings. That definitely would streamline your process. We turn people around in a matter of a month in Whitewater. We try very hard. And if it means that we have to have an emergency meeting, our Landmarks Commission does so.
Do you have a lot of appeals from your decisions or no?
We do not,
Okay. Do you have a lot
because we have the ultimate authority.
do you have a lot of denials?
Pardon?
Do you have a lot of denials? Do a lot of people, applications get turned down?
No, none.
Okay.
So the only thing I would add is, if we go in this direction, that there be something in there that says, if we finish our process prior to they finishing their process, what are we doing in that gap? Would that just continue as planning commission until they're up and running? If one moves faster than the other?
I mean, I think we can bring a few different sample ordinances to the table next month, and I'm sure there's different ways to tackle that. We can see how this model ordinance is written.
Is our old ordinance, is that any good at all?
Right now, I mean, it's, on paper, there's nothing wrong with it, it's just it doesn't really have any teeth, any way you slice it. Not only it's toothless in the sense that it's just an advisory body, but it's also toothless in the sense that they don't actually have any jurisdiction over anything. So it doesn't really apply to anything. There had been some confusion about that last fall where we thought maybe it did and it didn't, so it sounds like some property owners were kind of given some misinformation along the way. But as it is right now, based on what we understand, effectively, there's no real role for the HPC at this point.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm like, until it's changed, it's planning commission, common council, that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the interim, we won't hold the downtown projects up, but you will be the reviewing body for those projects. So until we get the ordinance amended and have applicable historic districts handed over to the HPC, we will review any project in that downtown Central Place overlay area.
And to be clear, anything that they want to do with their property downtown now has to come to the planning commission. That's the level of regulation that we're at. So if someone wants to repair their roof, they have to come talk to you first about it before they can do anything. And so it goes beyond pure aesthetics. It's any sort of basic maintenance. If their window falls out, they have to come talk to you first before they can do something. And I would love for that to be streamlined. And I would, again, I can't stress this enough, I would love for it to be collaborative. If most of downtown doesn't know that they're under this level of regulation, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to be out of compliance and do things that they shouldn't simply because they don't know any different. And if you do decide that you would like the HPC to have this level of oversight on them, I would love for them to be part of that process on what they would like their properties to look like.
So I got a question. If we said yes and they're gonna have control, can council override us? And
Change the ordinance.
Yeah, the ordinance amendment will go to the council for the final determination.
Yeah, we'd have to vote twice on it, and normally, in most cases, we waive the first reading at the meeting, and then we vote on the second reading, whether we're gonna push it through or object it, so. We can get it done in one meeting.
So, just to confirm, what are we looking for then tonight?
Yeah. Yeah, let's get to that.
Yeah,
I think
just kinda curious.
I think that the kind of, it's the question of which way you want to go here. If you want, I mean, you don't have to make any change at all. You could stand pat, which effectively, again, leaves them toothless. Or you could direct us to pull together some ordinances or some sample ordinances that you can look at that have an alternate structure that actually give the HPC a real role here. But then it becomes a question of, do you want that to just be advisory, but with an actual district that they actually have advisory authority, which they don't have now? Or where they're actually the deciding body with respect to a certain district that they're gonna have authority over.
Is that the thing, you know, we're talking about the central overlay district. Now, I know Holton Manor ain't in there, so are we gonna have like dots all over the city where you guys have the say? You know, like the band shell is out of that
Right,
central.
right. The band shell is a standalone.
Right.
It is very, what is recommended by the State Historical Society is that you have if you have historic districts, that you have a small number that are very targeted. So for Holton Manor, or Holton Heights is extremely targeted, a district like that. Or the downtown, that's a small, concise district. The map that Gary mentioned before covered almost the entire town. Well, you don't want that because you don't want non-conforming properties within your district. You want everything to be neat and clean and everything in compliance with the parameters, so.
Are you gonna have to define, when we make this map and have a new red-white area, are we gonna have to have those historic districts in that map? So you guys have pull in those areas?
Are you going
Or-
to make are you gonna make those standalone structures, like the band shell, that doesn't fall within a historic district? Are you going to make that a landmark on our map? Do you have a goal of doing that in the future?
Yes.
So instead of that parcel or that band shell being placed in a district, they would designate it as a historic landmark. So in the future, I think their goal would be to map it and put it on our map so that if in the future anybody wanted to do anything with the band shell, they'd have to come to the HPC for
Well,
approval.
I think we've all been around enough. We know the certain houses, the certain buildings that could lean toward historical preservation. You know, I think we've all been around enough. But, you know, I didn't know if we had to have that dotted all over the map of what you guys have control over. Or,
You have to have inventory.
Yeah. An inventory is created
okay,
so that you know which ones are landmark properties. And of course, the districts are easy to recognize because of the boundaries.
So does the HPC come back and say, we'd like to do the downtown overlay district? And then you guys give the HPC that authority, and then the next time we come back and say, we wanna do this group of buildings here, then you guys give up that authority for the HPC? Can it just be added on one at a time? Like that, you don't have to come up with everything in the city to have them.
Oh, no.
This
No,
could be an ongoing
no.
process.
Yeah.
Is that what you were sort of getting at?
no, I just, I wondered if we had to define that out. You know, I know we're concentrating on downtown, but I've lived in Elkhorn my whole life, and I know what certain buildings could lean toward going to that. So I didn't know if we needed to map those out so they could have control.
Is that something you would just come back and ask, we would come back and ask every time?
If I can just
Right,
interject
you would
for a
know.
second, the only reason that the Plan Commission is involved in the discussion about the downtown district right now is because we currently have authority over it. In the future, if our ordinance changes to say that they are their own, and they're gonna have the authority to make their own decisions, when they go to map new areas, like the Holton area, for example, when they go to map that, they're not gonna come to us and ask us for permission to do that. They're gonna do the process on their own. So right now, there's the conversation of the downtown area because the Central Place overlay is under the jurisdiction of the Architectural Review Board. And so if we decide to give that up, we need to amend our ordinance that pertains to the Architectural Review Board, because in our Architectural Review Ordinance, it states that the Central Place overlay is under our jurisdiction. So there'd be some ordinance changes. In addition to that, the map would have to be adopted as a historic district, and that would have to go through its own process. But in terms of any new historic district or any mapping of landmarks, the Historic Preservation Committee would do that on their own.
So am I hearing that the first step is to work on the ordinances?
Yeah, so I
And
think
does
that's a good point. I think the action item tonight is basically a very simple question. Do you want to stand pat or do you want to make a change? Because if you want to make a change, we can bring back some different samples and you can decide what makes the most sense for the city.
Does the planning commission have authority to make that decision,
Well,
to send it to council?
yeah, right, eventually. I mean, it would be advisory like everything, but
What we're looking for tonight is just a motion to come back to the planning commission with an ordinance.
with, or sample ordinances.
Sample ordinances.
Yeah.
And that would be my motion.
I'll second.
We've got a motion and a second. Discussion. Would the new ordinance make the HPC advisory or give them quasi
Just was gonna ask you.
judicial?
Yeah.
Or what's your intention?
The intent is to give them the authority.
With an appeals process, that's when I wanted to ask. I would feel more comfortable with the fact that we would still have an appeals process to either the Common Council or Planning Commission, but I would imagine Common Council is gonna be a lot better.
Does everyone understand what we're asking?
I would change my motion to include that. Who had the second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
All right.
All right?
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. I think we got to start.
I think Katie,
you all.
or is it Katie?
Yes, so my person who wants to replace their roof next month, until the ordinance is changed, will continue to come to the Plan Commission for those approvals. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay, thank you. That's all I need to know.
We meet twice a month, so they should get here. Easy enough. So, thank you all for coming. I think it was very productive.
Thank you all very much.
Did we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, then I have one thing to add, just really quickly then. If we're gonna make, some sample ordinances and get that put together, do we want to set an upcoming meeting date for a joint meeting to come back together and review those ordinances? Is that the best approach here?
You wouldn't have to, it would just have to come back to planning commission. I certainly could.
I mean, as a courtesy, do we want to involve the HPC?
I think so.
How heavy is the May 1 meeting?
The May 1st would be too fast, I think, for us to get ordinances together. I would lean towards the second meeting in May, the 15th.
You should be able to.
Yeah, I'd like to have them here.
Jason should.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right, so is that agreeable to the HPC to have another joint meeting on May 15th?
Yes, it's agreeable with me.
HPC, yeah.
Any other members here? Yeah.
'Cause we'll be here anyway. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So, okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.